Kristen Leslie here from the Special Ed Tech Center, here to give you a recap of Session 1 of Inclusion in Action, Practical Strategies to Modify Your Curriculum by Nicole Eridix. So when I think of inclusion and learning about inclusion, I think about it as putting a puzzle together. No matter what piece of the puzzle you're putting together, it gradually comes into focus, right? Piece by piece. And so learning about inclusion is this way. Some of you will focus on one area, others will be more interested in another. And you're going to follow your own path of learning because that's how we learn best, when something captures our interest and we follow that trail to dive deeper. This book study, the purpose was to get the book into your hands and then to gather you together with other colleagues to share your thoughts as you go through the book. And it's going pretty speedily through the book. So I'm going to encourage you to think about those of you who are from the same district. You may like to start your own book study and go through it in a different way at a different pace. But this really is to whet your appetite, to learn more about inclusion, and then pursue what really strikes you and the areas in which you want to grow around inclusion. All right, so let's take a look at the recap. The recap really is looking at what you had to share in the chat around what you read. I want to share with you a link to a Google folder where you have resources. Each week we'll put new resources in there. So if you're watching this on YouTube, the link will be in the description section below, and you can click on it and go to this folder. In the folder, you see 4 folders which relate to the different sessions that we're having. So today we're looking at Session 1, and you have notes in the folder. Okay, you've got the PowerPoint that led the discussion. You can download that, tweak it however, especially as you run your own book studies within your schools. But you also have the notes section. This captures what was discussed during the session. So if you missed the session, this is your recap, either the document or watching this video. So I'm just going to run through some of the things that were shared in this discussion. We started out by looking at words that describe an inclusive mindset. So you guys filled the chat with words that for you described inclusive mindset. We had words like everyone, collaboration, community, welcoming, opportunity for all, together, equity, meaningful, empathy, including everyone, all students, full membership, culturally responsive, and belonging. That word belonging came up over and over and over again. And so this is really what chapter 1 was all about, is this: how are you thinking about students? How are you thinking about your schools? How are you thinking about your students even beyond school? Do you have an inclusive mindset? The facilitators also had you rate your readiness, right? Your school's readiness for inclusion. And here you see from a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most ready, how you all responded. 46% of you are right there in the middle. We're gearing up for this. A good number of you were 2 saying, I don't think we're so ready, but we're thinking about it. So you see how you were rating yourselves. And as I thought about rating ourselves for readiness for inclusion, I thought, what are we basing that on? It's like if you asked me, rate yourself 1 to 5 on how you're doing health-wise. Well, I might have different ideas about that than you would. So what are some common things we would be thinking about? Well, if you ask me some specifics like, how are you doing with water intake? How are you doing with eating your fruits and vegetables? What's going on with exercise? Then I have something to grab onto and go, okay, I know what I need to be doing health-wise. I can rate myself and how I'm doing. Same is true with thinking about inclusion. What are some of those indicators or things we need to be looking at for inclusion? So within the notes, I put some links. This first link's myths and facts about inclusive practices. That just gets you thinking about inclusive practices in a fun way. Let's just go to it real quick and we can take a look. Okay, you see that there are myths 1 through 7, costs of inclusion, who can provide specially designed instruction, readiness for inclusion, curriculum and standards, parent and inclusion, disability and placement, and assessment and academics. So we just myth bust some things about inclusion. Some of the other links I have here are self-assessments related to your classroom. I particularly liked the Inclusive School Network self-assessment. That would be a good one for a leadership team in a school. I'm going to show you that one real quick. Here's what it looks like. Self-assessment. You scroll down and you see start the survey. What it looks at is instructional excellence, collaborative partnerships, responsive staffing and scheduling, strong parent partnerships, and inclusive leadership. So it gives you some indicators for each of those areas. And there's probably about 6 or 7 questions per area. And then it gives you a little bit of a rating and a place to start on assessing where your school's at. All right, so we went on from there in the session to ask the question, what are some of the benefits of all students being included in general education classrooms? So this is really looking at that mindset. You can take a look at all of those wonderful benefits that you see about inclusion, social and friendships, academic gains, again, belonging was mentioned, literacy skills increasing, peer support strengthening, relationships being built was mentioned over and over. Grade level core instructions, connections, academic gains again, motivation, friendships, learning that everyone can learn. So changing our own mindset about how students learn. Again, belonging and finding hidden talents, confidence increasing, and dispelling stereotypes. So a lot of great benefits that we see as a group. We went on to a question that relates more to Chapter 2, and that is, what are some of the ideas that stood out about supporting inclusion school-wide? A lot of your comments had to do with mindset. You talked about the importance of language. The words we use can create an inclusive environment. We talked about culture of inclusion and acceptance of differences, presumed competence, everyone within a school supporting all students. People mentioned students are general education students first. The belief that all students have the right to reach their full potential and achieve personal growth. We had people talking about when mindsets aren't that beneficial, thinking, I can't, I won't, I don't do this. But then how do we provide opportunities and choices for people to shift their mindset? One person said, this is where mindsets come into play. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. School-wide beliefs that every single person in the district plays a role from admin to custodian. So there were other themes that came up when talking about supporting inclusion school-wide. One was professional development, that we really need professional development that's meaningful, teachers and all staff. Also, being able to investigate and being willing to do your own learning. Another thing that was brought up is that you really need strong leadership to make cultural change. It starts with the principal saying yes. Pushback is too strong to overcome without that support of that administration. Also, someone brought up scheduling. Scheduling needs to be designed to support inclusion. And these are things that are talked about in Chapter 2. Going on to some discussion that related to Chapter 3, we looked at our thoughts on support staff and inclusion. Had comments about Table 3.1 as a preemptive approach to establishing a good working relationship between teacher and parapro. So take a look at that. You're going to find that on page 27. Some people talked about communication between all support staff being important, having the view that we're a team and that we work together for the benefit of all students. I'm going to let you read through your colleagues' comments on that. How can technology support inclusive spaces? We were running out of time at this point. We were coming to the end. And so some of you listed some ways in which technology supports inclusion. We will definitely revisit this. So I have a few thoughts from the Special Ed Tech Center to plant some seeds of how technology can support inclusion. And one is when you're thinking about your curriculum, when the students are accessing the curriculum, do they have multiple ways to access that curriculum? They might be reading it in the book. They might be listening and following along. They might be watching a video on the content. Multiple ways to access that content so that they have some options. And the same is true with assignments and assessments. Do students have multiple ways to express their knowledge, maybe with writing, with drawing, with speaking and recording, with making a video, with creating a digital book? The Special Ed Tech Center definitely have some tools for you to look into multiple ways of expression. So session 2 is already coming up here this Wednesday, February 1st. We're covering the next 3 chapters, chapters 4 and 5 and 6. They go into making curricula accessible through instructional strategies and accommodation. We look at making curricula achievable through modification, and then on to how do we modify curriculum for students who are performing below grade level. Come and join the conversation, whether you're able to read 1 chapter or all 3. We're going to benefit from hearing each other's thoughts, gathering resources from each other. So look forward to seeing you.